Ohio. New Orleans, the large seaport to the USA, the most densely populated city of the state of Louisiana. On a census of 2000, 484,674 inhabitants lived in the city, with agglomeration minus 1,337,726. After the destructive Hurricane Katrina in the fall of 2005, his population was reduced and as of 2008 made 311,853 inhabitants. Till the Hurricane Katrina, the Orleans arrival was the most inhabited arrival in Louisiana. Now he takes the third place by the number of the population, conceding to the next arrivals Jefferson and East Baton Rouge. Striking distinctive feature of the city is the mixed French-Spanish Creole architecture, interpenetration of cultures and multilanguage heritage. New Orleans is well known for the kitchen music. In particular, it is considered the homeland of jazz, and also annual festivals and carnivals, among which in the well-known Mardi Gras. The city is often called one of the most unique in the United States. New Orleans is located in the southeast of Louisiana on both banks of the River of Mississippi near her confluence with the Gulf of Mexico. The heart of the city, the French Quarter on the northern coast. Together with the rival Orleans, the city makes one administrative unit. History. New Orleans was founded in the spring of 1718 by French Mississippi Company under Jean-Baptiste Lamont de Benvilliers decree on lands of the people of Achidamac. He was called in honor of Philip II, the Duke Orleans, being at the time the regent of France. His title occurs from the French city of Orleans. The French colony was conceded to the Spanish Empire under the Confidential Contract in Fontainebleau, 1762. Having learned about it only in 1764, the French colonists didn't recognize the agreement and banished the Spanish governor during the revolt in 1768. However, soon the revolt was suppressed, and in 1769 over the city the Spanish colors were hoisted. During the War of Independence of the USA, New Orleans was the important port assisting insurgents by smuggling of goods and transportation of military equipment and supplies upstream of Mississippi. In 1779, Bernardo de Gaulle successfully conducted the so-called Southern Campaign of the minding British from the city. New Orleans remained under the power of the Spanish crown till 1803, when again for a while it returned under the French board. Practically all remained architecture of Vieux Carré. The French Quarter was constructed at the time of the Spanish board, except for Convent and Ursulinic. Napoleon sold Louisiana of the USA in 1803. This transaction became known as the Louisiana Purchase. After that, the city began to grow quickly with inflow of Americans, French, Creoles and Africans. A later wave of immigration was made by Irish, Germans and Italians. Sugar and cotton cultivated on large plantations with application of slave labor became the main source of income of the time. During a final episode of Anglo-American War of 1812-1815, the British tried to recapture New Orleans, having sent the contingent from 11,000 people. Despite big difficulties, the General Andrew Jackson with assistance of the American fleet managed to unite forces which part rebels from Louisiana and Mississippi. including free-collar people. Military personnel of United States Army, the big contingent of a militia of the state of Tennessee, an arrow from Kentucky were soldiers of Choctaw and local privateers. The last went into battle under command of the pirate Jean Lafitte. On January 8, 1815, the Battle of New Orleans took place. Crushing defeat was inflicted over the British troops under command of Sir Edward of Pakenham. Before Civil War, the port of New Orleans was of great importance in the transatlantic slave trade. Through port passed the raw materials going for export from internal areas of the continent and the goods imported from other countries, which were stored and overloaded on smaller vessels and extended on all Mississippi current. The river was filled with steamships, boats and sailing vessels. Despite the predominating role in a slave trade, in the same time New Orleans was a stronghold for the largest and safe community of free-collar people in the USA, representatives of the middle class, often well-formed and owning property. After purchase of Louisiana to the city, the wave of Americans of the English origin rushed. Within the 1830 years, the population of the city doubled, and by 1840 New Orleans became the third largest city of the USA and also the richest among them. The German and Irish immigrants began to arrive in the 1840 years, generally settling port workers. By this time, legislators of the state introduced a set of restrictions for talent of freedom to slaves, having practically nullified this practice by 1852. In the 1850 years, nothing threatened position of the white French-speaking population, and it remained very vigorous community. Training at French was conducted in 2 of 4 school districts of the city. All of them were white. In 1860 in the city there were free-collar people, representatives of a class of free citizens, mostly the mixed origin which expanded during the French and Spanish board. According to a census, 81% of the population concerned mulattoes, the generalized term for designation of various extent of mixture of ethnoses. Mostly treating to French-speaking group, they were handicraftsmen, an educated and professional class of the Afro-Americans. Most of the black population still was in slavery. They were used as servants, port workers, podmasteria, but the main thing for work on the numerous sugar plantations stretched in the district. As well as the elite of the Creole population of the city was afraid, Civil War completely turned way of their life. In 1862 the city was occupied by the fleet of Northerners under Benjamin Butler's command, the prominent state lawyer from the Massachusetts militia. Later residents of New Orleans nicknamed him an animal butler because of the decree issued by him. The occupation of the city of his army were met by indignation and open hostility from female Southerners that even led to skirmishes on streets. Then it issued the decree according to which a repetition of similar situations of such ladies will regard as prostitutes. Butler also cancelled teaching French at schools of the city. The measures entered on all state in the 1864, and then after war in 1868 strengthened policy of usage of only one English even more. By the time of official fixing of an ascendant position of English, he already dominated in the sphere of business and officials. By the end of the 19th century, use of French declined. The new wave of immigration of Italians and Germans also had an impact on this process. Despite it, by 1902, a quarter of the population of the city used French in the daily communication, and 2 more quarters excellently understood French. By 1945, many women of Creole origin, generally the senior generation, didn't speak English at all. The last large French-language newspaper, 50 Belle de la Nouvelle Orleans, the New Orleans Bee, was closed on December 27, 1923, 96 years later after the beginning of the activity. As the city was occupied at the very beginning of war, it managed to avoid the large-scale destructions caused to many other cities of the American South. The Army of the Union gradually established control over the coast and also over the region to the north along the Mississippi Current. As a result, the southern part of Louisiana was excluded from the leaflet about cancellation of slavery of the President Abraham Lincoln, which first of all was the military measure directed against territories under control of Confederation. A large number of the former slaves from rural areas and a quantity of free-collar citizens joined the ranks of the first black regiment created during war, under command of the Brigade General Danijel Ullman, 1810-1892. They became known as Corps d'Afrique, though this name appeared before war and it was applied to groups of free-collar people, and the new group mainly consisted of the former slaves. Later, in addition to them, the color troops of the U.S.A., by the end of war playing the increasing role in it, were created. The 20th century. Zenith of the population and economy of New Orleans in relation to other southern cities fell on the period before Civil War. From the middle of the 19th century, rapid economic growth began to influence all spheres of life. However, the leading value of New Orleans against the background of other cities steadily decreased. Development of networks of the railroads and highways struck river traffic, having redirected streams of goods on other transport corridors and the markets. To the middle of the 20th century, Navarre clearly felt that their city isn't the most advanced in the South anymore. By 1950, Houston, Dallas and Atlanta overtook New Orleans by the sizes, and in 1960 he was eclipsed also by Miami, even in spite of the fact that the population of New Orleans reached the historic high. As well as in a case with other old American cities, construction of the highway and development of suburbs promoted resettlement of residents from the downtown to new residential quarters beyond his limits. The census of 1970 recorded record decrease in the population since the city became a part of the U.S.A. Agglomeration of Big New Orleans continued to grow, but more slowly than in other main cities of a solar belt. Though the value of port also remained high, automation and transition to container transportations cost sets of jobs. The economy of New Orleans always was more focused on trade and financial services than on industrial production. However, even its small production capacities were seriously reduced after World War II. Despite some economic progress of the city authorities at Mayors Morrison, 1946-1961, and Chiro, 1961-1970. Agglomeration growth all the same lagged behind more vigorous cities. The 21st century. Consequences of the Hurricane Katrina, which fell upon New Orleans at the end of August 2005, were catastrophic. In protest of advance of a hurricane from the Gulf of Mexico, there was a collapse of a federal system of the protection against floods, which didn't sustain an element's impact that entailed the largest accident in the field of civil engineering for all American history. The partitions and locks constructed by engineering troops of the U.S.A. didn't cope with excessive design load that led 80% of the city to flooding. By the time of approach of a hurricane to the city, most of its inhabitants were already evacuated. Tens of thousands of inhabitants that preferred to remain had to wait for the help of rescuers or to proceed to points of the help at emergency situations, which became Louisiana Superdome and Memorial Conference Center. In August 2021, the hurricane, 4 categories under the name Ida, fell upon New Orleans, having become the strongest, the hurricane which affected New Orleans for the last 16 years, after Katrina. Wind gusts reached 280 km/h, and also there were big floods in coastal zones, including in New Orleans. The number of the victims of a hurricane in the state of Louisiana reaches 23 people, not less than 30 suffered. Considering the scale of destructions, many inhabitants decided to locate outside the city. Support at all levels was given in progress in restoration of the most affected areas. Local, level of the state and federal. In July 2006, the Bureau of a Census estimated the population at inhabitants. The following assessment recorded inflow of 320,000 citizens by March 2007, card inhabitants are 56% of population level till the Hurricane Katrina. The main tourist actions providing a noticeable part of the city budget were resumed. Large annual actions, such as Carnival of Mardi Gras or New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, weren't cancelled at all. Culture and polyethnicity. In the 17th-18th centuries, the French and Spanish cultures, as well as the general Catholic religion, related on spirit, built-up character of the local culture, absorbing in itself, along with elements of Romance traditions, many lines of the West Indian folklore. As the local population inclined towards France more than Spain, the French elements prevailed over the Spanish. In the 19th century, old French cultural traditions didn't disappear, but in a special way mixed up with elements of North American Protestant culture. New Orleans began to be called by Paris of the New World soon. Here former black slaves lived together with later immigrants from Africa or the French part of West Indies. Here generations white and black lived and mixed up. The French and Spanish Creoles, the American immigrants from Virginia and Kentucky. There were both Scots and the Irish, filling with domestic and foreign trade, authoritative French citizens and, at last, Spaniards whose most part was engaged in trade. Creoles considered themselves by the first estate of the city and diligently preserved the French customs and traditions. However, after slavery cancellation, they were gradually reduced to position of the ordinary black Afro-Americans. Nicknames: City Half Moon, Big Simplicity, and the Carefree City. The unofficial motto: Let good days pass. Louis Armstrong's homeland is considered a jazz cradle, place of numerous jazz festivals. In New Orleans there is an action of a popular American TV series, Firstborn, and also the popular national song, The House of the Rising Sun, and the famous satirical novel by the owner of the Pulitzer Prize John Kennedy Toole, Conspiracy of Dulce. In the French Quarter of New Orleans, the Southern Decadences annually held the Week Festival of Light, focused mainly on male gaze on the eve of the celebration of the Labor Day, the first Monday of September. Geography. New Orleans is located on coast of Mississippi, approximately in 169 km up the river from the Gulf of Mexico and to the south from the Lake Pontchartrain. The total area of the city is 907 km, from which only 468 km are the land. Initially the city was under protection of natural dams, or was built on sublime places along the Mississippi River. After the law about fight against floods of 1965, engineering troops of the USA built the dams covering the extensive geographical region, including that area where earlier there were swamps. Probably this human influence also led to a territory flash, however, it still is a subject of discussions. According to researchers of Tulane University and University Javier, today only about 51% of the territory of New Orleans is at sea level or above sea level. At the same time, the most densely populated areas usually are above. Average height of the city is about 0.5 m lower than the level of the ocean. At the same time, depending on the area, height changes from 6 m above sea level up to 2 m below sea level. Climate of New Orleans subtropical damp, with short, mainly soft winter and in the hot, damp summer. Average temperature of morning in January is about 6 C, and a day maximum about 17 C. In July of average at least 23 C and 33 C an average maximum. The minimum temperature was registered on February 13, 1899 and was 14 C, and maximum on August 22, 1980 reached 39 C. Average annual amount of precipitation about 1.63 ohm, and summer months the most damp and October the driest. Rainfall usually accompanies in the winter passing through the city of the cold front. Population. According to a census of 2010, the population of New Orleans makes 343,829 people. Ethnic structure. Afro-Americans 60.2%, white 30.5%, Latin Americans 5.2%, Asians 2.9%. Representatives of two and more races 1.7%. From persons of the Latin American origin of 1.3% are Mexicans, 1.3% Hondurans, 0.4% Cubans, 0.3% Puerto Ricans and 0.3% Nicaraguans. The Asian population of the city includes Vietnamese, 1.7% of the general population of New Orleans. Indians 0.3%, Chinese 0.3%, Filipinos 0.1%, and Koreans 0.1%. According to the latest data till the Hurricane Katrina for 2005, the population of the city made 454,865 people. According to researchers of Tulane University and University of California in Berkeley, from 10 to 14,000 illegal immigrants whose considerable part from Mexico live in New Orleans. Industrial value. One of the largest ports of the U.S.A. Center of oil industry. The economic value of the city began to fall from the second half of the 20th century, and his population began to be reduced. Sport. In New Orleans, two teams from the highest sports leagues of the USA, New Orleans Pelicans, Saints acting in the National Basketball Association, and New Orleans, from National Football League are based. In other leagues the city is presented by the teams, New Orleans Zephyrs, from the lowest baseball league of the Pacific Coast, New Orleans 2 Wood, from the American Soccer Championship in the enclosed space, and also Women's Football Club, Louisiana Jazz. Local businessmen also considered the possibility of the basis in New Orleans of Club of Mills. The main sports construction of the city is Mercedes-Benz Superdome, home stadium, Saints, the venue Sugar Bowl and other actions. At Stadium 7 times there took place the final of NFL Super Bowl. 1978, 1981, 1986, 1990, 1997, 2002 and 2013. And on this indicator the construction is a champion among stadiums of NFL. One more large sports construction of the city is Confuse King Center, the home arena, Pelicans, Vood, and also the venue of many actions. On a hippodrome of New Orleans there pass some of the oldest races in the country, Fairgrounds Racecourse. Competitions of college teams take place in Lakefront Arena. Annually in New Orleans there take place some of decisive students' football matches, Sugar Bowl and New Orleans Bowl, and also one of the Jetour Zurich Classic tournaments. Except Super Bowl in the city also there took place other large sporting events, such as Arena Bowl, an all-star game of NBA, a final game of the Students' Championship on the American Soccer, the final of 4 NCAA. Besides, in the city annually there passes the Marathon of Rock and Roll Mardi Gras, a race on 10 km of Crescent City Classic, and also 2 more runnings. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.